Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
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 Jaya Gopi Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari
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 Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Vajjanarandana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Vajjanarandana Jaya Yamuna Tiruvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari
Jaya Jamuna
Tiruvanachari
Jaya Kunja Bihari
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radha Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Radha Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Radha Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radha Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radha Hare Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Nam Sankirtan ki jai. Hare Krishna Maha Mantra ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so we are on the 8th chapter and we have finished more than 18th chapter and we have finished more than half of the 18th chapter. We proceeded quickly from the 19th verse till the 40th verse, and last time we covered 8 verses of the 18th chapter. So we will try and do another 6 verses today if we have the mercy of the Lord. So we saw the 18th chapter in 3 or 4 sections already. So the first to the 12th sloka of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita dealt with the question of Arjuna whether sannyasa is better or nishkam karma yoga is better, that is, renouncing the fruits of the action is better. And in the discussions, Krishna gave the opinion of the sages, opinion of others, and then his final opinion, where he said the renouncing of the fruits of your action is much better than no activity at all. And he concluded by saying that karma sannyas, that is the nishkam karma yoga or tyagi, and sannyas are both the same. So sannyas and tyaga is actually the same. So that's how he concluded this. Of course, we have to also remember that this is Krishna's summary of the Karma Yoga. So therefore, he speaks for Karma Yoga. And right through the fabric of the Bhagavad Gita, we also saw how it is our natural inclination to do some service. And therefore, Karma Yoga, that is activity with renouncing of the fruits, which becomes Nishkam Karma Yoga, when it is done properly with intelligence, is non-different from the Bhakti Yoga itself. So like Krishna said in the 3rd chapter, 30th sloka, which is like a rather important sloka from the Bhagavad Gita, which gives us the mood which we should have while doing our karma. Krishna says in the 30th sloka of the 3rd chapter, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyat yatma chetasa nirasir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigada jvara. So that is, therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, uh, without desire for profit, nirasir, and then nirmamo as well, with no claims of proprietorship, so and free from lethargy, fight. So he makes some important points in this sloka. First is he says, Mai Sarvani Karmani. You can say he advises us to surrender all our activities to him. Or, in other words, he tells us that all the work that you're doing should be for my pleasure. And in what consciousness he explains? First is he says, Sanyasyat Yatma Chetasa. So that is, you have to, with full knowledge of me, with detachment and full knowledge. So activity, when it is done with full knowledge, becomes karma yoga in its perfected stage, because it is in full knowledge of what you are doing the karma for, who is the object of your karma, that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then it becomes non-different from bhakti. So all the routes recommended by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita leads to a situation where, in the perfection of that route, it becomes non-different from bhakti. So, and then what is the other mode? One is sannyasya yatma, that is with a detached outlook and in full knowledge of me, that is sannyasya yatma. And then there are two more things he specifies. He says nirasir and nirmamo. So nirasir, with no expectation of any profit, and nirmamo. And nirmamo means with no sense of proprietorship, that this is the result of my work, this is what I have done. So no claims of proprietorship whatsoever. And then he says, in that spirit, yudhyasva vigada jwara. So completely free from lethargy, fight this battle. So that's what is the advice of Krishna in the chapter Karma Yoga. So when Karma Yoga is done in this mood, with knowledge and with detachment and with no expectation of profit and with no sense of proprietorship of the work done, then in its perfected stage, it becomes Karma Yoga. So, so that is what is explained even here, where karma, this sannyasa and tyaga, ultimately it is concluded that it is one and the same. So, yeah, then he explains from sloka number 13 until 17. He explains the second section of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the 5 causes of action. And the 5 causes of action are Adhishthanam, which is the place of action, which is the body of the Jiva, is the Adhishthanam. And then the second aspect, the factor of the karma, is karta, or the worker or the doer. And then the third factor is karanam, or the instruments of action, which refers to the senses. And then the fourth is the cheshta, or the endeavor that the karta has to do to achieve the goal of the activity. And then above all these things, Krishna says there is a factor of daivam, which is the divine sanction to the activity. So the reason for explaining this is, whenever we do any activity, we claim proprietorship to the activity, and we believe and work in an atmosphere where we think that we are the karta. So that's why Krishna explains from 13 to 17 that there are 5 factors of the activity, and only when those five factors come together, then the activity can be performed. And finally, the last factor, which is the Daivam, which is the divine intervention and the divine sanction for the activity, is very much essential. So, therefore, he makes it a point to let us know that we should not assume the any kind of work with the sense that we are the doer, because for doing any activity these five factors are involved, and the most important factor is the daivam, or the divine sanction for any activity to be performed. Then there is a huge discussion on the modes, the three modes of material nature, which defines all our action. And then in that section from 18 until 40, he discusses the one factor, which is the karma, and the first he discusses the jnana in the three modes: jnana in the mode of goodness, jnana in the modes of ignorance, and jnana in the mode of passion. And then he discusses the karma itself in the three modes, which is karma in goodness, karma in passion, and karma in ignorance. And then he discusses karta, or the worker or the doer of the activity, in a state of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So then also two more factors he discusses, which is the intelligence and the determination. For any activity to be performed, we need to have determination and we need to have the intelligence. So buddhi in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance is discussed, and the dhriti, or the determination, in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance is discussed. And then finally, all the result of the activity should give us some sukham. So, sukham, or happiness, in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, and in the mode of ignorance is discussed. So, in summary, it is mentioned that there is no being existing on earth or in heavens which is freed from these three modes of material nature, born of material nature. So this is an important point that that Krishna is making, that it's very difficult, or rather impossible, to not be under the three modes of material nature when we are conditioned souls. So the aspect that comes out of this is, as long as we are acting in these modes, there is no way that we can transcend the modes of material nature, apparently. So, and also it is discussed by Krishna to just tell us and let us know how strong these three modes of material nature is, and we should never take them lightly. So, in effect, we perform our devotional service in a mood of humility, understanding the strength of the three modes of material nature. And the only way we can transcend the three modes of material nature is depending on the Guru, depending on the Parampara, and depending finally on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the last week we discussed another important aspect. So, then we have to transcend the three modes of material nature. That is the first rule for perfection. So, we discussed how this purification has been prescribed, that is, to act above the three modes of material nature. It is mentioned that only through a dedicated process, or a plan and a program to release the control of the modes, can we go beyond the modes of material nature. And we discussed how Sanatan Dharma is so great, and because this is the only religion, that is the Sanatan Dharma, which has a prescribed program to release us from the control of the three modes of material nature. And then and the system that is prescribed for gradual elevation from the three modes of material nature is the system of Varnashram Dharma. So that is a system which has been put in place to make sure that we progress steadily by using this method of Varna and Ashrama. So the four ashramas are Brahmachari ashram, the Grihastha ashram, the Vanaprastha ashram, and the the Sannyas ashram. These are the four ashramas, and the four varnas are Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So by natural work, we always find that there are people who do the Brahmana activity, there are people who do the Kshatriya activity, Vaishya activity, and so also the Shudra activity. So these activities are naturally defined by the combination of the three modes of material nature that we are coming with because of our samskars. We are born with certain inclinations or qualities that we have naturally. So Varnashram Dharma is prescribed. Then in Varnashram Dharma, there are three types of Varnashram Dharma which we discussed. So one is the Vedic Varnashram Dharma, and the second is the Daivi Varnashram Dharma, or the third is the Astraya Varnashram Dharma. So the Vedic Varnashram Dharma is based on birth. So you're born in a Brahmin family, and therefore you're a Brahmana, or you're born in a Kshatriya family, therefore you continue to be in a Kshatriya background, and then so also a Vaishya or a Shudra. So that is called as the Vedic Varnashram Dharma. And the Astraya Varnashram Dharma is, we don't have any qualities that we are supposed to have of being a Brahmana, Vaishya, or a Shudra or Kshatriya, but still we claim that we are from this, we are from Brahmin background, or we are from Kshatriya background, or Vaishya background. So that is claiming based on whims and fancies without actually possessing those qualities. And the third is Daivi Varnashrama, which is based on the fact that you can display devotion in any varna that you may belong to. So actually Krishna describes the Varnashram Dharma as a gradual progression in spiritual life based on the Daivi Varnashrama. Well, the Daivi Varnashrama is exactly as per the diktats of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. So the four Varnas are actually decided not by the birth of the person or because a person is claiming to be in a particular Varna, but actually it is based on Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam. It is a system created by me based on your gunas and your karmas. So, Daivi Varnashram is what is discussed, where we are not dependent on Varna or we are not dependent on our ashrama. We straight away take on the direct process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and from whichever Varna we are and whichever ashrama we are, we just do the activities of devotional service and attain perfection. So that is a very fine example, and we see also that is really the mood of the Lord. He doesn't care about which varna you come from and which ashrama that you come from. He just cares that in whatever varna or ashrama you are you showing us? Is that? So, irrespective of which varna you are in or in which ashrama you are in, Krishna is only looking for our bhakti or pure devotional service. So, this is how far we've come, and Krishna illustrates that with an example where the expertise and the perfection of our spiritual life is explained as in the 48th verse, where Krishna says rather, Sahajam karma kaunteya sa dosham api na tyajet sarva rambha hitoshena dhumenagnir ivavrtha. So, which translates as every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. So, again, he emphasizes the point here that activity is important, and you should not say that every activity that we do is full of faults. There is no activity which is not sinful. Any material work you do, it is always accompanied by sin. In the sense, now I am in car business and we export cars. Now, when we export cars, am I able to ensure that these cars are going to people who are engaged in sattvic activity? Naturally, there will be criminals buying my cars, there will be smugglers buying the cars, and there will be so many types of sinful people who will be buying the cars. And the purpose why they are buying the vehicles, we can never be sure of. So, Krishna illustrates here by an example that fire is always covered by smoke. So, fire is something which is useful, and fire is indispensable as well. You need fire in your belly to digest, you need fire for cooking. So, fire is inevitable, and it is indispensable, and it is very useful and cannot be avoided. But then we should, along with fire, there is smoke as well. So, how do we use the fire? By removing the smoke. That is the art of working. So, how do we actually work without contamination? So, that of course, towards the end of this chapter, we understand how we do that. That is only through the purpose of, through the path of bhakti, that we can remove the smoke out of the fire and remove the contamination from our work by dedicating all our work to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then sloka number 49 until 55 discuss the Brahman realization. How do we attain the Brahman realization? Right through the um, fabric of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has never spoken about what a jnani does and what is the sadhana of a jnani to attain perfection in spiritual life. So, in this section, he needs to appease that section also. So, he discusses about a jnani. So, Jnani, as we understand, is a person who is a mental speculator. He speculates on the subject matter of absolute truth, and he um, follows the 90-90 system, and then he says, maybe this is true. Then he says, no, I don't think this is true. Now I've got proof. Then he makes a basic assumption again. And through this process of negation, he comes finally to the point where he is able to fairly understand the aspect of the absolute truth. So a jnani uses his mental speculation and intellectual capabilities in order to understand the supreme absolute truth. And then finally, he gets Brahman realized, or he is able to go thus far only that he is able to understand the effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the section here which discusses the Brahman platform of realization which a jnani aspires for. And for attaining that Brahman platform, what does a jnani do? Okay, so we move on to sloka number 49, which is Asakta Buddhihi Sarvatra Chitatma Vigadaspraha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadhigacchati Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Jitatma Vigadaspraha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadhigacchati. If you remember in the first section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that sannyasa and tyaga is the same, and a tyagi, a person who renounces the fruit of all activity, is better than a person who renounces the activity itself. And that he tells right through the fabric of the Bhagavad Gita that activity is very natural to the soul, and therefore a person must perform activity. But here he talks about Naishkarmya, which means he talks about the jnani who renounces the work itself, and he comes to the siddhim, or the perfectional state, through the process of completely staying away from all the activity. So this is also one of the processes which is technically correct, which we saw in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as well, where Krishna says that a person who is in the perfectional stage need not perform any activity. Meaning, when you perform activity, why do you perform activity? Because there is a desire to get some fruits of the activity. When you are in the siddhi stage or the perfectional stage, you don't have any expectations from the work, and therefore there is no need to perform any activity. So, strictly speaking, no activity need to be performed by a person who is spiritually perfect. But then Krishna gives examples. He says, Yad Yad Acharati Shreshtas. That is, that a person always follows a great leader, and the mass of the population need an example to follow. And therefore, he says that as an acharya or a leader, you must perform activities so that others follow you. Then he gives examples of perfected devotees like Janaka Maharaj, who is has the Lord as his son-in-law. What could be better than that? That's like a perfectional stage. Even he did his prescribed duties. So then he concludes by saying, so therefore nobody should avoid activity. However, here he is addressing the mood of the Naishkarmya Siddhim seekers, that is, the people who are seeking perfection by avoiding activity itself. No activity, no karma, so no reaction to the activity, and therefore you reach a stage of perfection. Technically possible, but practically not feasible. But still, he is explaining how a person in this mood can also attain perfection. So, the translation for this verse is one who is self controlled and unattached and who disregards all material enjoyments can obtain by practice of renunciation. So, here, when he's talking about renunciation, it is from the jnani perspective of renouncing the activity itself, the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. So, so this is the only place in the entire Bhagavad Gita where the sadhana of a jnani is described. How to do this kind of renunciation. What are the points that he makes in the verse number 49 is asakta buddhi sarvatra, that is, whose intelligence is detached from all the material objects. So he has no desire whatsoever for any material objects. So then such a person has completely jitatma, whose mind is completely controlled and is free from material desires. Yeah, so that such a person is called jitatma. And then vigada spriha, that is, who is without any kind of material desires. He What does he do? Sannyasena, he renounces all the activities completely and attains the perfection of no action and reaction. So when there is no action, there is no reaction. That is Naishkarmya Siddhim. So how does he then attain that kind of a stage? In the sloka number 50, Krishna just makes another point before getting into what is the kind of activity that a jnani performs. So sloka number 50 is Siddhim prapto yatha brahma tatapnoti nibodhame समासेनैव कौन्तेय निष्ठा ज्ञानस्य या param. O son of Kunti, learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection can attain to the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. So from 51 until 53, Krishna is going to explain the process of attaining the Brahma Bhuta stage or the realization of the Brahman. So we'll read from 51 until 53, and probably we should read the purports also for the next 3 verses to have a better understanding. So, buddhya vishuddhaya yukto dhrityatmanam niyamam yacha sabdhadhin vishayams tyaktva ragadveshau vyudhasya cha vivikta sevilakvasi yatavak yatavakaya manasa dhyana yogo paro nityam vairagyam samupashritah ahankaram balam dharpam kamam krodam parigraham vimuchya nirmana shanto brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So we'll read the translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. So being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance, and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful, such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self realization. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When one is purified by intelligence, he keeps himself in the mode of goodness. Thus, one becomes the controller of the mind and is always in trance. He is not attached to the objects of sense gratification, and he is free from attachment and hatred in his activities. Such a detached person naturally prefers to live in a secluded place. He does not eat more than what he requires. He controls the activities of his body and mind. He has no false ego because he does not accept the body as himself, nor has he a desire to make the body fat and strong by accepting so many material things. Because he has no bodily concept of life, he is not falsely proud. He is satisfied with everything that is offered to him by the grace of the Lord, and he is never angry in the absence of sense gratification, nor does he endeavor to acquire sense objects. So, the point here that Srila Prabhupada makes is he's never angry in the absence of sense gratification. So, we all experience, there were so many reports of people getting depressed, people getting into mental sickness during the time when we were in the lockdown situation. So, what was the reason for that depression is because the outlets for sense gratification got minimized and we were locked within our homes and practically in a stage where we were forced to live like aspiring jnanis. So, in a secluded enclosure of our home with no contact with the social world. So, naturally, this was a situation where we could not go out to shopping malls, we could not go to restaurants, we could not socialize with people. We are basically social beings, so we had a situation of artificial renunciation, which was so difficult, and therefore people were getting into mental situations. So, complete absence of sense gratification. Srila Prabhupada continues his purport by saying, nor does he endeavor to acquire sense objects. Thus, when he is completely free from false ego, he becomes non attached to all material things, and that is a stage of self realization of Brahman. That stage is called Brahma Bhuta stage. When one is free from the material conception of life, he becomes peaceful and cannot be agitated. This is described in the second chapter, 70th sloka. I'll just read out the meaning of that verse given by Srila Prabhupada in the purport. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, but and not the person who strives to satisfy such desires. So anyway, this is technically the way to attain perfection through the process of jnana. But Srila Prabhupada also explains by giving an example of a well. So the well has got a lot of dust, and um, you keep pulling out water from the well. Every time you pull out the water from the well, naturally the well water is getting a little agitated, and all the dust that is settled down in the bottom is coming up, and the water is kind of slightly dusty or dust filled water. So if you and the wind comes and also disturbs the water, and it's a trigger for the dust to come up and mix with the water. And if you create a situation naturally where you don't draw any water from the well and make sure that the water is maintained still without any breeze blowing in that direction, or by simply closing the well completely and not using the water becomes very still. So then, when the water becomes still, it's not as though the dust is removed, but the dust actually settles down at the bottom of the well. So therefore, when you see the water which is still for a long time, the water seems very clean and clear without any vision of the contamination which is there in the water still, but it has settled down at the bottom of the water. The risk in this situation is that any slight agitation because of the modes of material nature, for whatever reason, immediately the dust again kicks up and mixes with the water, and it becomes dusty water again. So that is the risk which is natural to this process of jnana. Or rather, all the methods of yoga that is prescribed by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, whether it is the process of jnana, whether it is the process of yoga, which is to understand the Paramatma within your body, and whether it is the process of dhyana, which is actually a continuation of jnana after mental speculation. When you have the Brahman realization, then you start meditating on the Brahman, and then you do dhyana and you fix your mind and completely absorb. And you may even use some Ashtanga yoga system to help you in that process of dhyana. So then you reach a stage where you are able to realize the personal feature or the Bhagavan feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there are two ways of doing it, whether it is karma, whether it is yoga, whether it is dhyana, or whether it is jnana. There is a I, me, myself involved, where we are saying that through our personal effort, with our limited intelligence and our fallible nature, we will understand by our strength the supreme absolute truth. The the shortcoming of this method is that we are trying to use our finite intelligence to understand a person who is the supreme absolute truth, whose strength is inconceivable, and we can never understand by our blunt material senses. Rather, the process of bhakti is a direct process. So even when you reach the Brahma Bhuta stage, you have to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and perform devotional service. So at the Brahma Bhuta stage, the Mayavadi gets disappointed. He feels that he has attained perfection. He realizes that that is the beginning of spiritual realization through the process of bhakti. So the bhakti method is so wonderful that we are not dependent on any of the other methods because it's a direct process of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And through the process of surrender, what happens? Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. So tesham satata yuktana, that is, you are engaged in eternal service to the Supreme Absolute Truth, and bhajatam priti purvakam, always doing shravanam and kirtanam of the holy names of the Lord with priti purvakam. And if you do that, the mercy will come down and descend upon you and your heart. And then dadami buddhi yogam tam, the Lord gives you the buddhi or the intelligence, yena mam upayantite, on how to come to me. So He gives by His mercy the understanding about Himself, which is a rather practical and the best method to understand the Supreme Absolute Truth, which we will understand in the next couple of verses better. So we'll try and complete the next couple of verses. So, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Na Sochati Na Kangshati Samaha Sarva Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes very joyful. And in such a situation, there is na sochati na kangshati. So he never laments or desires to have anything. And then he is also samaha sarva bhuteshu. He is equally disposed towards every living entity. And then mak bhaktim labate param. In that state, he attains pure devotional service to me. So, this is bad news in one sense for the impersonalist. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, to the impersonalist, achieving the Brahma Bhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. So, Brahma Bhuta is the perfectional stage in the eyes of a jnani. But for a personalist, a pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means for one who is engaged in pure devotional service of the Lord is already in the state of liberation called Brahma Bhuta. So, with all the efforts that a jnani puts, he reaches the position of Brahma Bhuta stage, which is like the stage where you can start performing bhakti. So, whereas Srila Prabhupada says here that a person who is performing devotional service straight away, which is the direct method, and bhakti is the only method which is not dependent on the other processes of yoga described in Bhagavad Gita. So, in that perfectional stage, you start off and then you are already on the Brahma Bhuta stage. So, that is the beauty of the process of bhakti. So, it's bad news for the impersonalists after putting all these efforts. Okay, so now you have come to the perfectional stage. Now you may start the process of bhakti for further perfection. So we are very fortunate to be blessed by Srila Prabhupada to take up this process of bhakti straight away. And further Krishna clarifies in sloka number 55, where he says, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yas chasmi tatvatah tatho mam tatvato nyatva vishate tad anantaram. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yas chasmi tatvatah tatho mam tatvato nyatva vishate tad anantaram. One can understand me as I am, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. Bhaktya mam abhijanati. So the poor jnani, the impersonalist seeker, he comes to the Brahmabhuta stage and then he realizes at that stage, Bhaktya mam abhijanati. Only through the process of bhakti can you actually understand me. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter the kingdom of God. Vishate tad anantaram. By Vishate means entering. Thereafter, you are capable of entering into the kingdom of God through the process of bhakti. So, all glories to to Srila Prabhupada for giving us the topmost method of God realization and emphasizing on it time and again that the process of bhakti is the topmost. And that, in fact, if we really look at it, is the real purpose of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, he is the compiler of all the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana. All these things were composed by Krishna. He says that in the sloka number 15 of the 15th chapter. He says, Sarvasya chaham riddhi sannivishto mataha smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedescha sarvair ahameva vedyo vedanta krit vedavit eva chaham. Vedanta krit, I am the composer, compiler of the Vedas, and he is also Vedavit. He is the knower of the Vedas, which he himself has compiled. So, which means he has compiled all these things, all the Vedas, all the Upanishads, everything has been composed, compiled by him and written down by his literary potency, who is Vyasadeva. So, after compiling all these Vedas, uh, which is so exhaustive, still he advised Vyasadeva to write Srimad Bhagavatam, which is directly dealing with the subject matter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotees. So, just by reading Bhagavatam, which is about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, and by reading the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the summary of all the Vedas, and the summary is actually more effective than the various textbook, because summary essentially is like gives you the essentials to go back home, back to Godhead, which is the perfection in spiritual life. So that Bhagavad Gita gives us the message directly, and time and again in the Bhagavad Gita he keeps emphasizing that bhakti is the only method, and by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and our wonderful Brahma Madhava Gaudiya Sampradaya, time and again all the acharyas and Srila Prabhupada and all the disciples of Srila Prabhupada have always emphasized on this process of bhakti, which is the only way to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, number 55, Krishna makes it absolutely and amply clear by saying, Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati, which means one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by the devotional service. That is Yavan Yes Chasmi Tattvataha. The Tattva, or the knowledge of the Supreme Absolute Truth, can be understood only through the process of bhakti. Tato mam tattvato jnatva. And when one thus knows me fully in truth, vishate tad anantaram, he can enter the spiritual world, the kingdom of God. So Srila Prabhupada is a very, very potent devotee of the Lord, a pure devotee, and we are fortunate to be in the parampara in which Srila Prabhupada comes. And by his mercy, we can just follow this process of bhakti, attain perfection, and go back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. So we'll do the next couple of sections. It's really very exciting to know that we are at the end of the study of the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, Bhagavad Gita is a complete study on. So it's quite exciting that we are reaching the end of the study of Bhagavad Gita, where we have just about 22 verses to go. 11 plus 10, yeah, 21 verses to go, which probably we can finish it. So, on one side, it's very exciting that we are completing the study of the Bhagavad Gita, but on another side, there is a sadness as well. Oh, we have finished the Bhagavad Gita, what do we do next? But anyway, that's nothing to worry, because Srila Prabhupada has given us um, so many scriptures that we can study other scriptures as well. And then each one of you, since you have got a fair knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, should also become preachers. The best way to solidify the knowledge that you have acquired is to preach to others. Like, Vishal Prabhu is there. It was so exciting for me to know that Vishal Prabhu has taken the initiative and he started classes from the first chapter onwards to his relatives and friends in India, and started classes on his own. Vishal Prabhu, can you unmute yourself and let us know which chapter you have reached with your relatives and family in India?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, with your kind guidance and blessings of Guru Maharaj, we have completed 18 chapters. So
Wow.
we are looking forward to starting with the new group soon.
Wow, that is so exciting. So when we give shiksha to people, this is the most exciting thing when people who've taken shiksha from us go ahead of us. So it's like as parents we have children, and when the children overtake us and become better than us, that is a source of encouragement for us. So all glories to you, Prabhu, and I'll definitely inform Guru Maharaj also on this. That brings us to the point when we have reached the end of the Bhagavad Gita and we have a fair understanding of the Bhagavad Gita. We should seriously think, if you have been chanting 16 rounds and if you have been reading the Bhagavad Gita, and we've also started the study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where we have reached, I think, the um, middle of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, if we are able to complete Canto 1 and 2, that is considered as like um, a basic requirement for taking spiritual initiation. So, we must all think of accepting a spiritual master in the line of Srila Prabhupada. So since we have been involved with this parampara for a long, long time now, I mean Sanjay Prabhu and the three Sanjays we have today. So yeah, all of us, Sanjay has spent more than a decade. Manoj has spent more than a decade. And then we have Kishore Prabhu. Again, we've involved um, with the study of Srila Prabhupada's books and translation ever since, I don't know how many years now. It's almost like 15 years, maybe a decade and a half, right? So we have been involved with each other. So you have been involved with Srila Prabhupada long enough for us to be thinking of taking a plunge and accepting a spiritual master. And irrespective of which spiritual master you're seeking initiation from, it will be a sense of satisfaction for us if you all come forward and say that I'm ready to take shelter and initiation. And believe me, it's our responsibility to fast track and make sure that you people are duly initiated into the parampara. So that's my request to all of you. Think about this and try and come to the point of taking a decision that you should get initiated soon. Initiation comes with a responsibility, then you have to start preaching to others and give this message of Srila Prabhupada. So we've got Hina here who is also already in shelter, and she's been in Krishna consciousness for um, a much shorter period of time, but then she is aspiring from His Holiness Shivaram Swami Maharaj. So it gives us a lot of joy when the people to whom we are teaching come to a point of initiation. We've got Rasa Mandal, who is already initiated by His Holiness Bhakti Bringa Govind Swami Maharaj, my spiritual master. So it gives us a joy to extend the family of Srila Prabhupada by formally inducting them into the process of spiritual initiation. So each one of you must think about it. If there are any fears, what will happen, what will not happen, let's have personal discussions and we'll try to see, because a lot of people are scared of initiation. Will all my material enjoyment go away? Am I going to be completely constrained to follow certain things which we are already following? I think Krishna will take care of it. And if there is something that can happen, Krishna will only keep you happier if you're connected to the parampara. So if there are, we have started meeting people socially now in small groups. So we will start that also within our group. We'll start meeting. So if there are any concerns that may be there, please feel free to express to us, and we shall try and give you our sincere advice without being judgmental about the situation. Okay, so thank you, Vishal Prabhu. You have completed 18 chapters. That means I have to buck up, and we should start discussing some of the scripture now. The smallest of them is the Nectar of Instruction. Probably we'll take up that. And now and then we will keep in touch with Bhagavad Gita as well, in summary format, and also we'll try and memorize the important slokas of the Bhagavad Gita and try to understand the gist of all the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita as we move along in the study of Nectar of Devotion, once we have done with the study of Bhagavad Gita. So thank you all very much. So have a good night's rest and wake up to another day of chanting and wake up to another day of Krishna consciousness. Any other points?
Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Sanjay Prabhu. Sanjay, not Chawla, the other Sanjay.
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhu, you're another person who must seriously think, because you're chanting your 16 rounds, you've assimilated
Yes, Prabhu.
the knowledge wonderfully, and you should seriously think of initiation. If there are concerns, let's talk in person.
All right, Prabhu.
Okay?
Okay, Prabhu.
Right. So the other Sanjay, the new interested candidate and very inclined to spirituality, introduced by our glorious Vishal Bhargav. So everybody must aspire to get connected with the parampara.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Yep.
Krishna. So yeah, so not to be fearful. Rather, Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishyami Ma Suchaha. Do not fear. Just surrender. I'll take care of you. So let's have faith in the words of Sri Krishna and progress in our spiritual life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. Very nice class.
Hare
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. We'll close the meeting for the day. Thank you once again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Nitya Mataji, for giving us your association once again after a gap.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.